If you look at Trump's level of support, it really didn't change from 4 years ago. As of this morning, Kamala had gotten 69,132,129 votes. 81 million for Biden in 2020 to 69 million for Kamala in 2024. Even after the blue state ballots are counted, because she will likely add a few million to that total, but I'm guessing that we are still going to be looking at about 10 million Democrats who just didn't vote Democrat this time. And so when I look at this, that's the story here. This country isn't any Trumpier than it was before. But the Democrats, they just blew it again with a candidate anointed by party elites who was showered with praise and money by the corporate class and billionaires.
I am so damn tired of being lied to. I don't think I can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it flies, but I'm not gonna buy it anymore.
Hello, my friend, and thank you for listening to the 304th episode of Congressional Dish. I'm your host, Jennifer Briney. The 2024 election is done, or at least the voting part of it is done. The vote counting is still in process, but I decided that I needed to say something here on Congressional Dish because it could be a couple of weeks before all of the votes are counted. But Donald Trump is going to be our president again, and I have heard from a lot of people, and I know that there are people that want to get my take on this, and I actually know that there are a lot of people that are looking to me for comfort, and this time I might actually be able to provide some. And so that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to tell you guys how I'm feeling about this. And spoiler alert, I'm okay. And I think we are going to be broadly okay. But because this podcast is a show about Congress, I'm going to first analyze our congressional situation. And then, of course, I will address the giant orange elephant in the room. But I do need to let you know that the results, as I am recording this episode, are not fully in. And so any numbers I give you today are going to change. And so I'm recording this on Friday morning, November 8th. But I do want to let you know what the picture is now and what we're probably looking at in terms of the vote tallies for both the Congress and for the presidency. And so first, let's take a look at the Senate, because the Senate is essentially done. We have the most answers about what the 119th Senate is going to look like. And what we know is that the Republicans are going to control the Senate. What that means in practice is that Republicans will be able to confirm lots of judges that Donald Trump is going to pick. And it means that the Senate committees are going to be chaired by Republicans. And so Republicans are going to determine what investigations happen in the Senate. However, the Republicans' power in the Senate will be limited because no matter what happens with the races that have yet to be determined, and there are a couple left, the Republicans are not going to have 60 votes in the Senate. And that is very important because of the filibuster. Now, filibusters are a weird Senate rule. They are not created by law. This is a Senate rule. But basically, the way that filibusters work in practice is that any senator can stop legislation from moving forward by filibustering it. And this is because when a bill is filibustered, 60 out of 100 senators are needed to vote yes on voting on the bill. And so basically, this empowers Democrats to stop controversial bills from even getting a vote. But there is a very important exception to the filibuster, and those are so-called budget reconciliation bills. Those are the only bills that can't be filibustered. And the budget reconciliation process has been used recently by both parties to get their most important goals across the filibuster and therefore across the finish line, the other party be damned. Now, this budget reconciliation process has only existed since 1974, and it allows a bill to be immune to the filibuster so long as the contents of it change revenue, spending, or the debt limit. Now, this used to be limited to one budget reconciliation bill per year because think about it. You have one budget. And so if there's only one budget per year, then you can only edit it once per year. And that's what the budget reconciliation bills are supposed to be doing. But the Senate Democrats weaseled a way to change that to 2 per year back in 2021, which they may regret because it could give the Republicans the opportunity to pass now 4 filibuster-proof bills during the next 2 years. Although I do have to note that, obviously, the rules about what the filibuster are not official. They're not like set in stone. They can be changed. And so Republicans, we're just going to have to see what rules they decide to play by. But the trend has been for each party to loosen the rules bit by bit and then come to regret it when the next party takes power. And this is a big deal because the budget reconciliation process is what has been used to pass most of the big pieces of legislation that I can think of during my adulthood. The Affordable Care Act, the Bush tax cuts, the Trump tax cuts, the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, all of those were done with this filibuster-proof process. Now, there are rules that limit what can be done. The provisions, like I said before, have to be related to spending in some way, so they can't just do whatever they want in these bills. But the rules are broad enough that some pretty major changes can be made. For example, they can use this to cut Medicaid and Medicare, and Republicans have used it repeatedly to cut taxes. The only thing that is legally safe from cuts via the reconciliation process is Social Security. And so, because budget reconciliation is a process that can sideline the Democrats entirely in the Senate, who controls the House of Representatives is really important. And right now, we still don't know what party's going to control the House. But here's where we stand on that. So right now, if you were to go to my favorite election tracking source, which is the New York Times election results graphics, specifically the Track the House tab, which, of course, I put the link to that in the show notes for you. But things look really, really good for Republicans at this moment. And the odds, I am going to say, are in their favor, but not entirely. Because a lot of the races that are still too close to call are in California. And a lot of Californians vote by mail. And the vote by mail people tend to be a lot of Democrats. But the thing about California is that instead of requiring election ballots to arrive by Election Day, California just requires ballots to be postmarked by the end of Election Day, which means that a lot of them are still coming in. As of this recording, on Friday of Election Week, California has still only processed about 60% of its ballots. And so if history is any guide, as the remaining 40% of votes are counted, they are predicted to favor Democrats. And so, like California's 47th district, where the Republican is up by 616 votes, that lead could easily be wiped away. Same for the close races in California's 27th, 13th, 41st, 45th, and even 22nd districts. There's a lot still out there. And so right now, the called elections, the finished elections, have Republicans with 211 seats in the House and the Democrats with 199. And you need to get to 218 to control the House of Representatives, meaning the Republicans only have to get 7 more. When you look at the situation this morning, it looks like the Republicans have it in the bag, but they don't because of this blue California wave that is pretty much something you can count on if history is a guide. And so this really is a wait-and-see situation. Although I do have to say, if I was going to place a bet, honestly, I would put money on the Republicans squeaking it out. And I would hope to lose that money. And I know how biased that statement is, but I've been doing this for 12 years. And I know the wide gap between who congressional Republicans say they represent. They say, especially lately, that they represent the working class. But I'll believe that when I see literally any evidence of it whatsoever in legislation. Republicans, in the hundreds, if not thousands, of their bills that I've laid my eyes on, consistently govern on behalf of corporate titans. They govern for the bosses, and they govern for Wall Street. Because quite frankly, if the Republicans have control of the House, that's going to enable the Republicans to do a lot for their actual constituency, which is the investor class. Winning the House would mean that the Republicans would control the committees and therefore the budget process, and they would get to control the investigations. Control of the budget process would allow them to pretty much write those budget reconciliation bills with no Democrats involved at all. And Republicans controlling every congressional committee likely means that consumer safety investigations and any investigations into corporate fuckery, and of course, any investigations into the dirty deeds of the Trump administration, well, those just simply wouldn't happen. We've seen what Republicans do with their investigative powers, and unfortunately, it's not much. And so all eyes should be on the House from this point forward. If the Republicans get 218 seats, that's not the worst case scenario, but it's close. All that's protecting us from the Republicans' worst instincts, from the corporate favors, from the freedom for fossil fuel and chemical polluters, from the freedom they tend to give to banks and Wall Street gamblers, and of course their warmongering. The only guardrail up would be the filibuster, which is trending easier and easier to get around over in the Senate. But that's where we stand. And I don't think I need to, pop on here and have an update when the House is called. You're going to hear about it in the news. But now you'll also know the significance of that call when it happens. And the significance is pretty huge. And so now, let's get into the Trump of it all. And the truth is, after attending the Republican National Convention and the Democratic National Convention, after attending their House parties, I'm really not surprised by this result. I wasn't sure that I was going to get really any insight from attending 4-day pep rallies for each party, but it turns out that I really did. Because what I saw at the RNC, taking their politics out of it, but what I saw at the RNC was a community, a real community. Because as long as people said they loved Trump in some way, they were in that community. It was the lowest possible barrier to entry. But it was different at the DNC. At the DNC, I saw a heartbreakingly fractured coalition with an arrogant group of elitists at the top who tried their damnedest to pretend there was unity around the support for them, which just wasn't true. The most loyal people in the party, the delegates, some of them were crying in the hallways. Some of them slept outside in protest of what was going on inside of the DNC. They slept out on the concrete overnight because they were being shunned. Because, let's be specific, Democrats of Arab descent were literally prohibited from being heard. And in the hallways, there was talk in the hallways about how uncool it was that no one got to vote for the candidate. And there was definitely talk about that out here in the streets. But the people on that stage, it was all joy for them. You look at the Democrats. They had 3 unfair primaries in a row, with the most recent one being the most egregious of them all. 0 votes from the people picking Kamala Harris. And none of that was acknowledged. And a lot of the Democratic Party foot soldiers, the people that go out and knock on the doors and spend their time and their money because they don't get paid for this, those people were just not feeling the joy, at least not all of them. And so the choice was made to ignore those people that weren't feeling the joy. That might have not been clear to many Americans because, after all, their strategy was to hide everything from you, including their candidate, quite frankly. But I was in the room. And so the results of their arrogance were not surprising to me. There were a lot of demoralized Democrats. And basically what the national popular vote numbers are showing, they make sense to me. So again, we haven't gotten all the ballots in, but if you look at Trump's level of support, it really didn't change from 4 years ago. So in 2020, Trump got 74,224,319 votes, right? So a little over 74 million. And right now, as of this recording, Trump has 73,472,148. So he's about 1 million shy of where he was in 2020. Now, there are a few million ballots still left to be counted, and so I do expect that when they're all counted, Trump will have either gotten a few fewer votes than he had in 2020, but he'll probably just stay about the same. So basically, MAGA didn't grow, but they did show up. But the demoralized Democrats? President Biden, not exactly the most popular person in the universe, in 2020, got 81,284,666 votes, so a little over 81 million. As of this morning, Kamala had gotten 69,132,129 votes. 81 million for Biden in 2020 to 69 million for Kamala in 2024. That's like 12 million people who voted for Democrats in 2020 who did not vote for them in 2024. And even after the blue state ballots are counted, because she will likely add a few million to that total, but I'm guessing that we are still going to be looking at about 10 million Democrats who just didn't vote Democrat this time. And so when I look at this, that's the story here. This country isn't any Trumpier than it was before. But the Democrats, they just blew it again with a candidate anointed by party elites who was showered with praise and money by the corporate class and billionaires. I see a Democratic Party in power that has abandoned their base, which used to be workers and used to be people of all colors and faiths. Democrats used to have the big tent, but lately, I went to their parties. It does feel more welcome over at the MAGA party right now, even if the policies don't match the vibes. The Democrats' joy vibes, those felt fake because they were. And so people just chose to not participate in their charade. MAGA showed up to a real party, and the Democrats skipped the lame one. And now we're going to have President Trump part 2. And because I know that some are thinking it, yes, I voted for Jill Stein. As I explained before and will explain again, I'm currently a registered voter in Texas, and I know how the Electoral College works. I knew my state would be voting in untouchable numbers for Donald Trump, and that he would be getting all 40 of our Electoral College votes, which is precisely what happened. I voted for Jill Stein because she's the candidate who is promising to be the commander-in-chief that I'd like to see in this moment in time, specifically one that gives a damn about Palestinians, and who would do what they could to stop Israel's now even more obvious land grabs. Because you may not know this, because our news isn't telling you, but Israel, or I should be more specific, the Netanyahu government is literally clearing every single Palestinian from the northern part of Gaza and has said openly that they will never be allowed to go home. The Netanyahu government, which is currently representing Israel, they are stealing North Gaza right now, today, using our weapons to do it. And Jill Stein has been acknowledging that reality and calling it what it is. Wrong. Unlike Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. And so I voted for the person who best represented me at this time that I am absolutely horrified by what my government is participating in. And in the process, I had hoped that enough people would join me in Texas by voting for Jill Stein and get the Green Party 5% of the vote, because that would have guaranteed them ballot access and some federal funding the next time. Because both the Republican and Democratic parties are now fully servants of the investor class. They serve billionaires and Wall Street, and no election made that clearer than this one we just lived through. And I think we need alternatives. And while I'm certain that the Green Party didn't hit the 5% threshold, I think it says a lot that the New York Times isn't even listing the Green Party or Libertarian Party tallies nationally on their president tab. We are being told that our only options are the corporate party or corporate party light. And I voted to change that with the only vote that I have. And so I regret nothing as a voter here in Texas. But since this is the third party's voters' fault blame game has once again begun, let's see if third-party voters like me are actually the reason that President Trump is going to be President Trump again. And again, these numbers will change, and so I'm rounding, but the counting is pretty much done in all of these key swing states, and the main points I'm about to make here will remain valid. So first, let's check out Michigan, which is a state that Kamala really needed to win. Kamala got 81,600 fewer votes than Trump. Jill Stein got 44,600 votes, meaning if every Jill Stein voter voted for Kamala, Kamala still would have lost. In fact, Jill Stein and Cornel West combined got 51,400 votes, meaning if every voter that some seem to think owed their vote to the Democrats but betrayed Kamala by voting for the person they actually wanted to win, if every one of those people had voted for Kamala Harris, Kamala still would have lost in Michigan. Now let's move over to Wisconsin another must-win state. Kamala got 29,300 fewer votes than Trump. But Jill Stein and Cornel West combined only got 15,000 votes, meaning that if every Jill Stein voter and every Cornel West voter had voted for Kamala, she still would have lost in Wisconsin. Now let's move over to Pennsylvania, where Kamala got 139,000 fewer votes than Trump. Jill Stein got 33,500 votes, meaning if every Jill Stein voter had voted for Kamala, Kamala would have lost Pennsylvania. In fact, in Pennsylvania, every third-party candidate combined got 66,500, meaning if every Jill Stein voter and even libertarian voter voted for Kamala, Kamala still would have lost in Pennsylvania by a lot. And now let's go check out North Carolina, where Kamala got 189,800 fewer votes than Trump. All third-party candidates combined got 64,800, meaning if every Jill Stein voter and every Cornel West voter and every Libertarian voter and even if every Constitution Party voter voted for Kamala, Kamala still would have lost in North Carolina. And while we're at it, the state of Texas, where I personally voted for Jill Stein, Kamala got 1,569,000 fewer votes than Trump. Jill Stein got 82,300 votes. Chase Oliver, the Libertarian candidate, got 68,200 votes. Both of those combined, had they all gone to Kamala, wouldn't have gotten her even 1/10 of the votes that she would have needed to win my state of Texas. And so, kindly, fuck off with any messages that you have sent or intend to send me, or that you intend to send anyone else blaming third-party votes for Trump winning this election. Because you are wrong. And based on my experience during the last Trump administration, I do think that this is something I need to say to everyone. Anyone who from this point forward sends me messages to this effect, essentially blaming me in any way for the Trump administration, you will be immediately blocked and kicked out of my community. No more private feed for you, and I don't care how much you're paying me. This is why we crowdfunded this show. I am hired and fired every day, and I have the financial freedom to fire any one of you too. But I am not putting up with Trump-induced rage being aimed in my direction again this time. Because I am just as powerless in this country as you are. I am not Joe Rogan. The reality that I have accepted is that the reach of this podcast is simply too small, and will likely always be too small, to ever make a numerical difference in a national election. This podcast, I am now fully clear-eyed about this, exists to inform you because knowledge is power. Somehow you found this podcast and have kept listening to it, and for that I'm grateful. Thank you for doing that, and especially if you're supporting it financially. And what you get in return for listening and supporting this show are details about how laws are changing and details about what Congress is being told by experts in hearings that no journalists bother to cover, which still baffles me. But that is information which will help you to make your own personal decisions about how to chart your own path through this upcoming show. You will know about benefits that you are legally entitled to when you have health insurance, and you won't be able to be dirty tricked. You will know about new laws that will literally pay for things that you need. You will know about products that Congress knows are killing like babies and pets and yet remain on our shelves. You will know if chemicals are being allowed to be dumped in mass quantities in your drinking water. And you will know if Congress is preparing, quietly, to bring back the draft. Knowledge is power, and knowledge about congressional actions can affect your finances and your literal lives. And that, I know now, is why I do this. I do this to help empower my community, which you are a part of. But I wasn't always this clear-eyed. For a while, I thought it was possible for this podcast to expose Congress to enough people that we might vote differently. But so far, after an absolute clown car of a Congress, so far in this election, only 5 members of Congress who were running for re-election have been fired. And we've seen this same result in every election. No matter what behavior we expose here, these people keep getting rehired. And there's nothing I can do about that. And this show, quite frankly, it hasn't grown in almost 2 years. And I don't know why that is, but I'm done beating myself up over this. This is our community. Maybe it grows, maybe it doesn't. But it's large enough that I know that with every episode, I can help many thousands of people make wiser decisions about your purchases, your finances, and your voting decisions. And that's good enough for me, because I know now that it has to be. And now that I've gotten my ego in check and have internalized the limits of my power, I will not tolerate being held accountable for power I know I do not have. The 2017 through 2020 collective freakout and the shit I took during those years from people who proved incapable of controlling their political emotions, it damn near broke me, and it damn near ended this podcast multiple times. But now, more than ever, I feel like we need to know the details of what's going to be done in law. Because no one in corporate media is going to tell us, at least I don't think, based on the fact that during the first Trump reign, they chose instead to make shit up about Trump being a Russian agent instead of reporting on the actual things he and the Congressional Republicans did. Now more than ever, I see the importance of this work, for myself and for you. But I have learned lessons about how to do this that I will incorporate during whatever chaos we're going to endure in these next 4 years. And the main lesson is, I will not be a punching bag this time. I will not be blamed for world events that I do not control. And in order to maintain my sanity and enforce this boundary, I will be quick to block and to remove even paying producers from the Congressional Dish community who tell me that my vote is a cause of anything. We are not going to be awful to each other in this community. That is rule number 1, and it will be enforced. We are going to navigate whatever comes next with empathy and respect for each other. There are plenty of communities that thrive on fear and hate if that's what you're looking for, but that's not how we're going to behave here. And if you have already lashed out at me this week, apologies are appreciated, but I'm going to give a lot of grace for the things that have already been said. And if you have been lashed out at, I suggest you do the same. Because I think one of the reasons that I'm so calm about the return of a President Trump is because I prepared myself for it. I was kind of expecting this. A lot of people, though, were not expecting this and are having very strong emotions. This election was horrible. The absolutely absurd amount of money that has poured into our election process subjected us to a nonstop torrent of spin and outright lies for years. All of our realities have been warped, and those who were believing the narrative of joy and unity coming from the Democrats, they're shell-shocked. And so let's give them some grace. Let's give each other some grace. And let's give those who are upset some time to grieve. And the rest of this episode, if you are one of the shell-shocked, the rest of this episode is for you. Because I remember being shell-shocked in 2016. In 2016, after being assured by the genius corporate pollsters that Hillary Clinton had the election in the bag, I was shocked when Donald Trump won. And I recorded myself and my friends on that election night. And you can hear it if you want to go back and find it. I'm not going to play a clip because it's embarrassing. And it's embarrassing because I freaked out. I made a fool of myself. I thought my friends were in danger if they left my house because there were going to be riots. I basically held them all prisoner for an hour. I went straight Looney Tunes. And so I do know what you're feeling, but I'm not feeling it this time. This time, here's what my reaction was when we realized that the presidential election was over and that Donald Trump had won. Because I was, once again, on a live stream, but this time I was with Justin Robert Young and Andrew Heaton, my co-hosts on We're Not Wrong. But this live stream, this was Justin's. He was hosting it for his show Politics, Politics, Politics. And as he was reading results, I looked behind the cameras and saw 3 people either in tears or close to tears, including 2 people who are my dear, dear friends. And so as I said this, I was looking at people that I love straight in the eyes. I said this a few hours ago, but let me say it again. We've gotten through 4 years of this already. If this happens, we were fine. Even with the House and the Senate, all he accomplished was tax cuts for the rich. Fine. He doesn't really have goals. So there's that. We did 4 years. They were chaotic, but we kind of know his game now. We know the gig. It's less shocking. He can't run again after this. We will survive another 4 years. We've already done it.
Yeah, but Taiwan.
I mean, there's definitely, I'm not saying they're going to be a fun 4 years.
I think they'll be a very interesting 4 years.
That's a word for it. I have the anxiety for sure. I don't think this is a good thing, obviously, but I don't think this is the end of our democracy. I don't think we're in any like physical danger. I think the biggest danger that we face is that our empire isn't going to control the world. And honestly, we've killed a lot of people. So maybe having a bipolar world instead of this unipolar, like maybe in the grand scheme of things, that's not the worst thing. We don't know what the results of this are going to be. They don't necessarily have to be all bad. I do kind of like that RFK, who's extremely skeptical of food companies and drug companies, like if he actually gets into the FDA and puts real regulators in there, I think that could be fucking great. And I really like that idea. That's the one thing that if he actually keeps that promise, I'm excited about, because they do have people like Casey and Callie Means that have the ear of that administration who are saying we shouldn't have these dyes in our Fruit Loops when they don't have them overseas. So there are ways that this could actually turn out well for us. And Trump is extremely thin-skinned. So even with something like Israel and Gaza, the common wisdom is he's obviously going to be worse because he just does whatever the Israelis want. But if there's a lot of public pressure, he doesn't like being unpopular in any way.
He's also bitched at Netanyahu publicly.
Already. He was the only one that did that. Yeah. So it's like I'm not saying it's going to be good, but it's not the end of America. Like, we'll be okay. We were okay in the first 4 years. It'll be okay. And I'm not saying this just to make people feel better. Like, I honest to God believe this with 100% of my soul.
Okay. Here we go. Good. You hugged their teddy bear. Let's talk about numbers again.
Oh, Justin Robert Young. He's lucky I love him so much because sometimes I want to kick him in the balls. But that was Tuesday night. That was election night. And over the course of the next few hours, it became clear to me that more teddy bears would be needed because people are upset. You know, on the way home from that live stream, I was driving in the middle of the night on empty roads, just trying to car karaoke some Spice Girls in peace. But my phone just kept dinging. Ding! We're f***ed. Ding! Is our country fascist now? Ding! Will they ban vaccines? Ding! Trump's going to kill us all when he starts launching nukes. Ding! There goes my health insurance. I have pre-existing conditions. I don't want to die. Ding! Elon is going to destroy the economy. Ding! Do I need to stockpile birth control pills? Ding! 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 This went on for days. So people have a lot of fears. And I get it. These are people I know and love, and none of them are stupid or crazy. In order to scare you into voting for Democrats, you have been force-fed all kinds of terrifying future predictions of doom that would come to pass if Trump were to become president again. But the thing is, like I said, we've dealt with Trump before, and this isn't like 2016. We know what is entering the White House. What is entering the White House is a guy who says truly crazy shit, but who accomplished very little. What is entering the White House is a president that still has checks and balances on what he can do. What is entering the White House is a guy who still insists that he won the last election, but who did, in fact, leave on January 20th, 2021. And so to make us all feel better, including myself, the next morning after all of us We're Not Wrong co-hosts went home for a brief nap, we then got together the next morning and recorded our next episode. And I want to play the second half of that episode for you now, because even though all three of us were feeling okay to begin with, every one of us after recording this episode said that this exercise made us feel better. Because what we did is that we made a list of all the scary things that were being communicated to us about what a second presidency would be. And then we went down the list one by one to analyze how scared of these things we should actually be. And we really looked at two questions. Are these scenarios possible? And if so, are they probable? And when we broke it all down and really analyzed the worst case scenarios, the situation isn't as dire as it may seem to many people. At least we don't think so. And I can pretty much guarantee you that the three of us, Justin is an expert in politics, Andrew is a former Fox business employee, and I'm an expert in Congress. We are really dialed into this stuff, and we probably have a better grasp on the details than the vast majority of people in this country. I think our opinions on this stuff is valuable. And so, here is about an hour of our post-election We're Not Wrong. I hope this makes you feel a little bit better.
Jen, you wanted to talk about some real world things that may or may not happen. This is largely guided by some of the feedback that you have gotten over the last 24 hours.
Yes, I have found that people are reaching out to me for comfort. And one thing that I think would be helpful based on my own interactions with some people that I love is there is a lot of, I don't know if it's a lot of people, but I know that the people that have reached out to me are feeling a lot of fear. I've seen some pretty extreme reactions to a second Trump presidency. And so I would like us to do an exercise that I think could help all of us. I know it'll help me, but I would like to list all of the things that we have either heard people are afraid of or we're told we're going to happen with the Trump administration. Like, let's list all of the worst case scenarios.
Yeah.
And I'm going to write them down, and then we're going to go one by one and analyze, A, is this possible? B, is this likely?
Okay.
And see what our actual threats are. And that way, as we move forward, if we're going to mobilize, we can kind of look at, what's actually a danger to us personally, what's a danger to people we love, and what has been completely overblown and we don't really have to worry about.
Sounds good. I like this.
Yeah. So I have a list just from this morning that I've already started. So one of the things, obviously, we've been told that we are now a dictatorship.
Okay.
So I think we needed to analyze that. I also heard from a few people that are concerned that their healthcare is going to get significantly worse, that there's going to be more powers for the insurance companies to deny people care, especially pre-existing conditions. I've heard that JFK Jr. being in charge in any way of any health regulatory agencies is really bad because he's an anti-vaxxer. I've heard people are concerned about the $2 trillion in cuts that have been promised, particularly by Elon Musk. People are definitely concerned about the mass deportations. People are concerned about deregulation in general. And I'm going to put kind of like clean air and water in that category because of the drill baby drill promises. And the impending nuclear war, because Trump is such a psycho.
I mean,
What else do you think could happen?
Well, I mean,
like the worst case scenario.
Do we want to? I mean, I think that's a good list. Do we want to go one by one?
Go through? May I take the first whack at
let's
this?
just make sure we have everything. Like, I want to do like all the doom and gloom. Let's put it on the list and we'll go through it all.
Add in the economy and tariffs, because that's actually the thing I'm most worried about.
And what about you, Justin? Is there anything else that you've heard?
I mean, that I've heard
that people are afraid of, even if you're not.
No, that's pretty much it. Those are the major food groups that I've gotten.
Okay, so should we just go in order that I listed them, or
sure?
So let's start with dictatorship.
I, for one, welcome the great leader,
the all-powerful orange.
Let me take a whack at this. Like, we're not in Robespierre territory. There's all sorts of character flaws that are, I think,
spell it out for the dumbs, Frazier.
Yeah, I don't know what Robespierre is. I'm the dumb. Spell it out for your dumb.
We don't have a literal capital F fascist who's about to round up dissident media people and send them to a re-education camp in Iowa. That's not happening.
How do you know? Because
we've done this for 4 years previously. We went through this exact same fucking thing. So in 2016, I was freaking out, and I'm freaking out. Then, by the way, I'm inundated with messages of people that blame me personally for the election going to Trump because I voted third party in fucking New York because I understand how the Electoral College works, you fuckwits. And get it. Had people randomly take things out of context from a show I was doing to try and figure out how I was racist because I'm a nice guy and I'm a soft target. So people come after me. Fuck you. So that was happening in 2016. But I'm freaking out. I don't like Donald Trump. I'm worried about this. Right. And then like 2 days later, I started getting messages that were literally like, we need to come up with a list of where we can hide our Jewish friends. And I was like, what? Where? Because it was literally into like, we are in Nazi America territory. We're not in Nazi America territory. We're not in, there is a strong man who is going to abolish the Senate and put his horse as, like, we're not in that territory. Maybe he would if he could, but guess what? Like, great news. We live in America. There is a system of checks and balances. There is a system of law. There's a system of legality.
I'm going to play the role of the terrified and say that the Supreme Court just gave him immunity and he didn't want to leave last time. He just said that if he had it to do all over again, he wouldn't have left in 2020. So do you think he's going to leave in 2028?
The Supreme Court did not, as is frequently stated by, I think, over-the-top commentators, say the president can do whatever the fuck he wants with impunity. What the Supreme Court effectively did was make a rubric of this is what the president can do that is under the purview of the president. This is what the president may not be able to do that is subject to judicial review. Like, for the most part, what it did was clarify there are 3 buckets of presidential action. Stuff the president can do that you can't get mad at him about. He can appoint ambassadors for whatever reason he wants. You can still prosecute him on bribery if he's accepting bribes to put in ambassadors, but you can't if he just puts in an ambassador. They made an intellectual scaffold work. You can disagree with the decision. I have some problems with the decision, but the idea that the Supreme Court just gave the president a rubber stamp is incorrect. It is intellectually irresponsible, and the people that are telling you that are taking advantage of you. And so don't freak out about that.
To tag team on that, specifically the line that you mentioned of, like, he said that he wouldn't want to leave. For the love of God, Democratic voters and liberal media enthusiasts, stop. It is damaging to your health to take ad libs from Donald Trump speeches, treat them with deadly seriousness, and freak out about it. Listen to that quote. He's talking about how good things were under his administration. He says, as just like exhaling, should have never left, as in the good times should have continued, and then just moves on to something else. He's not specifically talking about how he wishes he would have barricaded himself in the Oval Office. He has said more things to that effect in the past. It wasn't that. It's just, this is the same thing as like the Liz Cheney should have been in front of a firing squad, when it was his phrasing of, like, he said, you should give Liz Cheney a rifle and then have 9 barrels focused on her and see whether or not she wants to send people to war. Usually in firing squads, you don't give the person getting shot a rifle. So it doesn't even fit cleanly as a thing, which is why it kept getting truncated to 8 barrels shooting at her or whatever. Look.
And the anti-Trump media didn't mention that he also talked about how this is the last term that he'll have. Like, he's already talked about when he leaves.
I've watched him speak over the last 6 months. That dude had nothing else in the tank.
Yeah.
He put it all out on the field, probably to his detriment. You know, there's a reason why I think that there were experienced campaign people that were watching him. They're like, he's running out of gas. His voice is shit. He's being more rambly. He feels like there's an obligation to it. Now, they looked at it from the Democratic side as like sundowning and like, this is the end of the MAGA movement. Narrator. It wasn't. But look, he's going to be in there. He's going to be more low energy than he has been in the past. And he's going to be done. That's it.
Another thing here.
He reached Valhalla. All he ever wanted to be was as popular as Obama. And boom, he did it.
You have limited.
Yeah, he might, because he was kind of campaigning the whole first term. He has no reason to do that anymore. Like, this might be a different Trump this time, because he never really had any goals for the country. It was all about him winning. Now he can't even run again. This is going to be a different administration in a lot of different ways, but I don't get power hungry from him. I get ego driven.
Yes.
I want to win.
And he's got it forever. He's Reagan now. He's Cleveland.
So in terms of the way presidential administrations work, if you have an effective president, good, bad, whatever, but just effective, they pretty much get one big thing, because the stars are going to align where they've got enough political capital in the tank, and they've got the House and the Senate, or at least majorities of people that will vote for them in that particular way. They get one thing done. What was Obama's main thing? He got Obamacare in. Yeah, that was it. He wasn't able to do any of the other shit he wanted to do because he blew it all out on Obamacare. I would say with Trump, tax cuts and Supreme Court justices are what he got done, right? A mind-bogglingly effective president gets maybe 2 things.
Yeah.
And then like Biden got one thing, like he got the Infrastructure Act, right? Trump's going to get 1 thing, probably. And then once the 100 days are up, we're in the midterms.
Usually you don't get that.
The Senate and the House goes Democrat. Like you're not. And then another thing to add to this too, like the whole dictator thing. We're having a fairly open conversation about our problems with Donald Trump, or at least we've done that previously. I am not worried about reprisals from Donald Trump, and I'm a coward. I'm a coward, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm not worried about Donald Trump. So you shouldn't be either. And I'll add, as somebody in the media here, the media is a part of an adversarial role between the press and the presidency. Me personally, I think it should always be adversarial. I think the press should always be scrutinizing people in power. I don't like where we are, where you go, well, I'm blue press and you're red press and it's my, no, I don't like, I'm always against whoever's in power. But as it is right now, the media is going to do a wonderful job of scrutinizing every goddamn thing that Trump does for the next 4 years. And they were going to not do that if a Democrat was in power.
I just hope they don't make shit up this time. Because that kind of led to the second term.
Yeah, they will. Yeah, newsflash. They will. They're going to overdo it, but they're not going to underdo it. We'll put it this way. If you're worried about the press overdoing it or underdoing it, they're going to overdo it.
Because this is the other thing, is that like the government version of the campaign phenomenon of let's take Donald Trump out of the one thing that he said out of context and blow it up into an entire news story that nobody even hears the original quote. They just read the conversation that's happening, is what I like to call the who farted and where stories that happened. And they were profligate during the Trump administration. And that is, Donald Trump in a meeting with advisors said every redhead should be shot. And now it's like, oh, who is on the record? Nobody.
Yeah.
But according to 4 sources that are familiar with what happened, Donald Trump said all redheads should be shot. And now that's the Chiron redhead shot. The Republican congressman, do you believe that redheads should be shot? Well, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. And now it's its own thing for 72 hours. Calorie free. Has nothing to do with the good or bad things that Donald Trump would be doing during his governmental time. And guess what? There's a lot for you to disagree with. If you are a Democratic voter, he's going to do things that you really don't like. And you should really be aware of exactly what those things are and not worry about whether or not he called a Caribbean nation a shithole country or any of the other 50,000 stories that happened like that during the first term. Like the less you can consume of that, the less you can give energy to those stories, the better. They're not helpful. And also, all presidents get weird off-color shit. Go listen to LBJ tapes if you want to think that, that inner sanctum of power is, this West Wing-esque, a quippy bullshit. It's not. It's usually a bunch of old men talking about like shit that old men talk about at country clubs.
And they say a lot.
Yes.
Okay, so we're not worried about dictatorship. How about healthcare? How about all of the protections we have from the greed of insurance companies disappearing?
So noting that the president's probably going to get one thing to do, here are the 3 things that I think are probably the top priorities for the Trump administration if they actually want to get done. The Trump tax cuts are going to expire in 2025. That's going to be a top priority for the Trump administration. So tax cuts, I think that's probably something that they're going to expend social capital on.
They're going to make the Trump tax cuts permanent.
Yep.
What are the 2 in terms of trying to sift through it's not really word salad. It's more of like word shotgun. Trying to sift through the word shotgun, the word fire hose of Trump and Vance over the last 8 months. What have they talked about? What I see is a ton of talk about tariffs and immigration. So if I had to guess as to where the energy of the Trump administration is going to go, it's tax cuts, immigration reform or wall building, and tariffs, and like distantly manufacturing as a result of that. Healthcare's not been a big priority for them this time. Are they going to tinker with it? Yeah. Is it going to be central? Is it around the edges? Probably around the edges. Healthcare is a massively complicated cluster in the United States, and I don't think you're going to see anything yay or anti-Obamacare level stuff coming up in healthcare policy.
Well, number one, as we all understand, since healthcare is awesome and everyone loves it and everyone loves what's happened with Obamacare since it went in, and it's just evolved perfectly, except for one thing. That, of course, is pre-existing conditions. Donald Trump has said that that's not going to be touched. He didn't try to touch it during the first term. Even that's a part of the reason.
He did.
Well,
the repeal and replace effort was real, but they also were delivered a massive fail. They're not going to try and do that fight all over again.
And if anything, where I think the difference is now that we are 8 years into the populist MAGA movement, what I would say is more likely than the kind of corporate rejiggering that they were going to do with repeal and replace initially, which would have been, one oligopoly swapped for another version of an oligopoly with the insurance companies, is there's probably more people that are willing to take the fight to insurance companies themselves in this makeup, both with Democrats and Republicans that largely make a lot of their money directly from small dollar donations. That was not the case during Obamacare. That wasn't the case even really 8 years ago. Like now that is what it is. I mean, I would see more of an opportunity to say like, oh no, let's make insurance companies fight each other nationwide, or like some of these reforms that have never really been broached because the insurance lobby is so powerful. I think that is less powerful today in this makeup because of where the energy is on both parties and because of where the money comes from on both parties than it's ever been.
Well, and I can be more specific about that. Healthcare is the one area where I actually have some hope for the next few years, because there have been investigations. I did one episode on it, but there has been quite a few hearings after I did it about pharmacy benefit managers. These are essentially middlemen that are inserted between pharmacies and insurance companies that negotiate prices. But the problem is they've been purchased by the insurance companies. It's a giant fucking scam, and both parties are pissed off about it. And those hearings are refreshingly bipartisan. And so I actually could see them cracking down on this, which could bring down prices for healthcare. So I don't think they're going to get rid of any of the benefits that we've got from the Affordable Care Act, because they tried and they failed. But also you have to keep in mind that when they were pushing to repeal and replace, there's this gap between the Affordable Care Act becoming law and it actually going into effect and people getting the benefits. They were operating in that gap before people actually had the benefits, before they could go to the doctor and have one physical year be covered for free. Now we've kind of gotten used to having the 10 essential benefits that are included with our health insurance. It is so much harder to take those away.
Yes.
So that's why before these things went into effect, that's why the Republicans were like, we need to stop this before people actually understand the benefits they're getting. It's going to be so much harder to take them away now that I see no signs whatsoever that they're even going to try. I'm not worried for my healthcare, is basically what I'm saying.
I'm not. No.
Yeah. Along the same lines, we have people who are freaked out about RFK Jr. having any role in the FDA or Health and Human Services because he's an anti-vaxxer.
I am terrified about RFK, mostly because I am in actuality a feral bear wandering through Central Park, and he has been very violent toward my people.
I'm afraid because I am a brain worm.
And I am a dead whale.
I'd actually like to take this one if you guys. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll start. I've got some difference between me and Jen on this one. So I listened at your behest, Jen. I listened to the interview that RFK Jr. did with Joe Rogan. And I would describe him as a very intelligent vaccine skeptic. He talked about the inefficacy of vaccines multiple times on that podcast. He is not somebody that is pro-vaccine. And it wasn't, as I thought it was going to be, just no, vaccines are great, but I'm worried about the unguents being used, or the adjuvants, whatever the exacerbating character is. He went on to talk about how he thought smallpox vaccines actually didn't cure smallpox, that it was really just better nutrition, and the smallpox vaccines actually caused smallpox. So he's an anti-vaccine guy in my view, or a vaccine skeptic, to put it very nicely. I think he is going to waste a bunch of money if he's put in charge of the FDA or the vaccine approval process, because we've already got an abundance of data on this, and he is going to make us go through unnecessary and redundant checking on vaccines that will waste money. But I don't think it will make us less safe.
The
I think
federal
it will,
government?
Yes, I know, right? I think it will end up spending money needlessly that could go elsewhere. So it's going to be an issue of allocation of resources and wasting of resources. But the idea that we're not going to have vaccines anymore, or that like smallpox is going to come back, that's overblown. It's just going to be expensive.
I mean, also, I think that vaccines are only really valuable when you have enough buy-in. And obviously there are different philosophies as to do that, up to and including legally mandating them. If a vaccine skeptic is part of the process and then it gets approved by the FDA and it's said, and RFK is like, I checked it, it's okay. Like,
yeah,
then
Yeah.
maybe it creates a little bit more trust from low trust individuals.
Which is something that we're lacking right now.
Yeah.
For good reason.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's excellent points. I agree with both of them. He's also promising to bring in the perspectives of people like Casey and Callie Means and the guy that owns Ways to Well, where they're talking about preventing diseases largely coming from our food and drug supply. Because, as they pointed out in this hearing that I'll be airing on Congressional Dish soon, if you get Fruit Loops in Europe, they're slightly different colors because they color them with like beet juice and things that are natural. Here, they use these chemicals that we know are linked to cancer. Like our FDA is not protecting us. Like basically they can use a chemical as long as they want until it's proven unsafe, where it's the opposite in other parts of the world where you can't use something until you prove that it's safe. I think RFK Jr. bringing in these particular people to talk to Trump, I think this could be really good for our health system. I'm actually really excited that these people have Trump's ear because this is something I've been worried about for a long time since I've started checking the back of boxes. Like, Joe asked me for granola bars. And so I went to Whole Foods and I was there for 15 minutes reading the back of boxes until I found one that was real food. And I don't feel the need to do that in other countries. So I actually think this could be a really good thing to have someone that is not only skeptical about what's in our drugs and our food, but has been a lawyer that has been fighting these companies for so long that knows their tricks. Like he's not just skeptical of the products, he's skeptical of the companies.
Yeah.
And that I think would be really nice if he is given the freedom to go after them for saving money by making us sick.
And if Donald Trump is promising, as he did last night, a golden age in America, we probably need a Kennedy horn dogging through DC again.
Yeah.
That's usually been a part of some of our best times. Just ripping.
Plus, I like Cheryl Hines.
Oh,
If she's still sticking around. I don't know.
I don't know. Cheryl's.
Where's Melania, by the way? Was she on the stage last night or is she
think
just like, I'm not doing
I
this
saw
anymore?
I
pictures
believe
of
she
her.
was,
Yeah.
yeah.
She's around?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
she
hope
was
she's not
was at
crying
the,
again.
She was at the MSG rally.
Okay. I hope things go better for her in the second term.
I think
didn't
she's
ask
just
for any
going to
of
stay
this.
in New York.
I think she should.
I think she's just Barron's in high school. I know. I
Yeah.
think he graduated.
Yeah, Barron's pretty old now. And they still
He's
protect
old enough
him
to
from
vote
the
because
media.
I saw a picture of him voting. So he's 21 at least. Or no, 18, sorry.
18.
18, yeah.
I am pretty impressed with how they've protected that kid because he's really
Well,
never
he
a
apparently
subject.
directed he was the one that was pointing out all the podcasts that Trump needed to go on. He was the one that was like
right.
Theo Vaughn, Flagrant 2.
Oh, I forgot about Theo Vaughn.
Yeah.
Yeah, Barron's right. Got to hand it to him.
I mean,
He's going to
God,
be a great
just
54th
to go back
president.
to that, JD Vance, and I think we talked about this last night. JD Vance was the arc of disproving the mainstream media stuff. That it starts out with like, oh, look at all these things that JD Vance has said, crazy cat ladies and F the couch and blah, blah, blah. What a weirdo, Christian nationalist. And then he's laughing at Theo Vaughn making a cocaine joke. And you're like, oh, you're just kind of a dude. Why did I think that you screwed a couch and you were a weird incel? Like, oh, you just seem like a earnest dude who has a young family.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. And that comes from that thawing comes from the podcast because he did the podcast circuit.
Sure does.
Anyway, go ahead.
So next one we have $2 trillion in cuts, which are going to be determined by Elon Musk.
I will say ideologically, and this is stuff that I have heard, and I know Andrew has heard, ideologically, there are people inside the Trump administration that are like, this is our once in a generation moment, especially now with a mandate at their back, to chainsaw through bureaucracy. That this is a moment in time that they desperately want to be put in charge of massive arms of the American bureaucracy and sundown them. Just swaths of the government. They want to fire people. They want to make them redundant. Now, whether or not they can do it, whether or not their desire is going to meet their ability to do it, I think that the American bureaucracy has been very resistant, very effective at self-propagating throughout history. I do think that there are ideological people inside the Trump administration that feel entitled and emboldened to say we are going to make America, from their perspective, more efficient. You're going to get a better reaction from your government by cutting things down, and we can make things less expensive so you can start to pay down the debt. That's their perspective. Obviously, we're talking about real people, real jobs. We're talking about where Heaton lives now in DC. A lot of those people work for the federal government. They're not going to be pleased with it. But I do believe that there are ideological forces inside the incoming Trump administration that do want to drastically slash things.
Yeah. Two things. In terms of the cuts, I think that Trump's going to try to reinstitute the Trump tax cuts. I am worried about that because I'm very worried about the deficit. And I don't think we should be cutting taxes while we are running a massive deficit. We now have interest rates exceeding the defense budget, which is fucking insane. I want to repeat that. That's fucking insane that we're doing.
Just money we hand to the banks.
Yes. Yes. And it's crowding out spending that could go to other things. And it's crowding out spending that could go to the grow to the economy. Even if we're not approaching the debt cliff, which probably won't happen for another 20, 30 years before we go Vermont Republic, the crowd out factor of that, of money that could either go to government programs or alternately just grow the economy and make everybody wealthier, that's going to be more and more going towards interest payments. So I am not in favor of the tax cuts because I think they're going to militate against the deficit. That being said, cutting the government, yay. I want the government to work well. I want it to be effective. I want it to be competent. And one of the ways you do that is by having it focus on the shit we actually want the government to do, rather than having it be a giant morass of sclerotic and ineffective programs. And the American federal government is full of inefficiencies. I don't like, we've been doing this program for 3 years. Very rarely do we talk about like, man, that's a shining beacon of efficiency over there. There's a lot of inefficiencies in it. Elon Musk specifically, if we want to focus on him, is there in effect in an advisory capacity. The president does not have the ability to go in and cut programs. What the president can do is staffing. What the president can do is allocating budgets that have been designated to the president within a congressional framework. So if Congress says the Department of Energy gets 80 million, the president can maybe allocate it within that agency if it's not already been allocated by Congress, which can already, I mean, Jen can fill me in on this, but Congress will go, we're giving 20 million to the Department of Energy specifically for regulating nuclear energy. We're going to give 40 million to the Department of Energy in general. Well, the 40 million general spending, that's something that the president has latitude on because it's within the executive branch. But for the most part, though, Congress outlines where the money is going and what specific stuff it's going to be going there. It's going to be spent on. The president has discretion in terms of staffing and in terms of limited amount of allocation. That's what Elon Musk is going to be advising the president on. The likelihood, in my opinion, that Elon Musk is going to be hanging out with Donald Trump as a member of the administration by the end of the administration is about 5% because his turnover is so incredibly high that I don't think he's going to be.
He did make it an entire presidential cycle without firing his campaign staff.
Yeah.
Which was rare for him. He has not done that in the previous two times.
He did, but Elon also has an ego. Like, I think those two are going to butt heads eventually. Like, did you hear the story about how Elon left the Super Bowl and went to Twitter because he was pissed off that President Biden's tweets were getting more views than his?
Yes.
Like, this guy is just as insecure as Trump is. So at some point, it's going to come to a head. Andrew, I think you hit the nail on the head. Cuts and spending are determined by Congress. So we still don't know who is in control of the House, but no matter what, there is not a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. There is going to be some protection from, because like when you think about what we actually spend our money on, a lot of it is Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps.
The majority of it is Medicare and Medicaid.
Yeah.
By an overwhelming amount.
And half of our discretionary now is war. I would love to see some cuts in that department. But that's Congress's purview. So this is another thing where Trump is promising things that he doesn't have the power to do.
One thing I think that they probably will try to push through, and I don't know the specific mechanics on this, but some of the ideologues that Justin is referring to that I've spoken to, is there's some mechanism of whether federal employees are at will or you can only fire them with just cause. And I don't remember the specifics to this, but that is something that they
are going in with a plan.
Yeah. So what you are likely to see is making it easier to fire federal employees, which, by the way, I'm fine with, because the point of federal employees, the point of the government is to help the American people and do the things we want. It's not to provide jobs. So if there's an efficiency that needs to be built into it, my priority is for the money to be effective rather than for make work programs.
Well, so that's the rub. If he is going to be firing people who are like overseeing corporations that are polluting air and water. Like that's
Well, hold on. Let's kind of separate. There's two things, right? I think Elon is going to look at a couple spreadsheets a few times and say, like, I think it's over here, Donald. And that'll be that. I don't think that Elon Musk, the thing that Elon Musk, I think, is way more interested in, quite possibly to the point that he wanted to move to Pennsylvania for 2 months and give $1 million away to people that signed a pledge, is not anything to do with government efficiency or even necessarily his belief in the MAGA movement.
Tariffs on batteries?
he wants to go to Mars.
AI.
AI, yeah.
He is now, right now, today, the most powerful voice from inside that industry on AI. He has maybe the 7th most popular product. I can tell you with authority that it is terrifying for some of the people that are at the top of that industry, up to and including OpenAI, a company that he helped found, that he hates the CEO of. And
Well, he's one of the, it's going to kill us all, we need to regulate it guys, isn't he? Is he not one of the people that's saying that we need to worry about this? We need the
Until
government
he
to
was able to
intervene?
make money from
we'll
it.
see. Yeah, no, he hates OpenAI. I think OpenAI is very worried about now that he is going to be the voice inside of Donald Trump's head on that factor. But if you believe that AI is going to be a gigantic pillar of our economy now and growing, including all the attendant things like GPUs, like power, all the things that are going to go along with AI's boom, that I believe is enough for Elon Musk to say, yeah, carve out 500 million. Let's move to Pittsburgh and get this man elected.
But he's also incentivized to get rid of the regulators in multiple industries that he is a titan in. And I think that is a part of this too. If you don't have the staffing to do the policing, then the companies can do more of what they want to do.
Yeah, I mean,
it's one of my biggest concerns.
Yeah, I think it's. That being said, I think the people that are looking to fire people are not Elon Musk. Those are other elements of the coalition that are coming into this government. And they are more the libertarian leaning folks who are the Vivek Ramaswamy, like that, probably like the most popular person that has talked like this. Kash Patel's another one, that are out and out like, here are these one weird tricks that we can use to reduce the federal workforce by a quarter in 2 years.
I'd also say, like, remember that the federal government is not a regulatory body that also happens to do other things. The regulatory element is a big part of the federal government. There's also a ton of allocating subsidies of agencies that run things. Coburn for years had his government waste spending report. It's now been taken over by Lankford. If you ever want to see just death by 1,000 cuts, this is a great example of just, they're all programs that, like, kind of, I guess that sort of makes sense why I can theoretically see why there might be some sort of scientific reason we need to see if ants can sort screws in space. And we're going to give $8 million in allocation to this particular private company that got a grant, and they're going to send ants with screws in space on the International Space Station. We're giving them $8 million for that. But then you start adding it up and you're like, oh, so that's like $16 billion on little programs like that we've added up. You're going to see a lot of those. Hopefully they get cut, not because they're necessarily bad, but because that kind of thing maybe shouldn't be on the taxpayer bill. That should be something that the private sector is investing in as opposed to taxes. The other thing, if I was going to pick something that I think that they're probably going to go after, my guess is that you're more likely to see a situation where the Department of Education gets gutted and becomes a advisory body and an informational body as opposed to a program administrator, and education becomes once again largely a state-based activity. So there are no doubt regulators that they're going to want to boot kick. I don't want to indicate that like there's going to be no decline in regulation, but my suspicion is that you're going to see programs and agencies that have a lot of kind of benignly intended, but dubiously outcome situations that are going to get scrutinized.
There's an afuera gang that is right now at the doorstep.
Yeah. And we've kind of already halfway done it. So I'm going to skip down to one and just talk about deregulation in terms of clean air and water because of all of the drill baby drill stuff that we have heard them say. Like, this is one of the things that I'm concerned about. Now, I talked to husband Joe about this morning. As we know, he's a solar power engineer, and he was saying that the market fundamentals now are not what they were in 2016, that because solar and wind are so much cheaper than oil and gas, like, he is not worried about this at all. So my worry is more climate issues. Like we're just going to be burning and exporting as much fossil fuels as possible for 4 more years. I do worry that the regulatory agencies are going to be staffed like they were before by like Ryan Zinkies who are just not going to police the corporations. And this is the type of thing that if you're just like drinking your tap water, I don't know how to protect ourselves from this type of stuff. So this is one of my concerns. I think it's going to matter a lot who he appoints as EPA.
You mean in terms
Interior.
of like fracking?
I mean, fracking, pollutants that are released into bodies of water, because this is one of the things I've noticed the Republicans do through my entire career is that they like to loosen regulations on what can be released into our waterways. They do it a lot. If they can get that type of stuff through either by executive order or...
Look, I think if there is a clear line that I don't think is really arguable of whether or not the environmental regulatory state was on the side of Donald Trump or Kamala Harris,
Yeah.
I believe it was very clearly on the side of Kamala Harris. So yes, Donald Trump will be prioritizing gas prices over environmental regulatory.
I think it's a valid concern, Jen. I think it's a valid concern.
Legit, one of the things I would do to protect myself from this, if I didn't already have it in my apartment, is I would be installing something on my tap water to be filtering out.
Now, what
stuff.
I would say, I'd be curious to see where, especially if Susie Wiles is the chief of staff because she hates him, but where like a Ron DeSantis would end up in a Trump administration because he's term limited for governor in Florida. In another world where he didn't run against Donald Trump, you would imagine that he might be in line for something like attorney general or something like that. But if he were to join the administration, he's got a really good record on environmental stuff in Florida.
Really?
Oh, yeah. He is a big protector of Everglades and stuff like that. He's got a really bipartisan, agreed upon good record on environmental stuff. So he would be an interesting selection for something like EPA or Clean Waters.
Oh, you know what? I can tell you one thing that people are going to really freak out about that they shouldn't freak out about. Of the litany of freakouts that are going to happen, of which some will be legitimate and some will be exaggerated. This happens every time a Republican comes into office, is the Department of the Interior goes back to managing resources instead of becoming an environmentalist organization. The Department of the Interior was founded as a way of managing resources for ranchers, large public land that was owned by the federal government that was rented out to ranchers for grazing. That's why the Department of the Interior exists. Under Jimmy Carter, he went, I, the president, have decided that the Department of the Interior no longer exists as a large agency to allocate federal grazing lands. It's now an environmental agency.
Okay, now your voice, though.
I have determined that our environment was given to us by God. And then Reagan came in and went, well, I'm president. We're actually going to restore it to the thing we originally made it for. And this happens every time Republicans come into office. The Republicans come in and go, yep, we're going to turn it back into that thing it was created for. Then the Democrats come in and go, no, it ought to be an environmental thing. And every time it switches, everybody flips the fuck out and thinks that it is this like insane thing. It's like, look, the Republicans just never agreed to the unilateral changes that Jimmy Carter did. The Department of Interior will absolutely have a Zinke character in it.
Yeah, for sure. Mass deportations.
Yes, and I'm worried about that. I'm worried about that for 2 reasons. One, I'm really worried about the people that are in there. I'm a pro-immigrant guy. I'm kind of unabashed about it. All the things about how, yes, there's bottlenecking at the border. I think we should be allocating resources to communities that have been hit by this. I think those are very legitimate concerns at the border of being stretched thin and oversaturated. We ought to have border security, all those things. That being said, I think we are way too restrictive in the legal process of entering the country. There is a tremendous amount of economic activity in the country that relies on immigrants, whether they're legal or illegal. And I don't fault people for trying to come into our country to make a better life for themselves. I'd like there to be a better path for them to become Americans because I welcome good people that want to work hard. That's a good thing. I am worried for them. And I am also worried for the economy of the United States. I think that that's one of 2 elements of the Trump policy platform that I think could really be difficult for us economically in terms of rising food prices. And yes, that is a concern.
I wonder where this is going to settle out. There's no doubt that there will be expulsions, certainly of gotaways that have come in over the border. Like, look, Biden f***ed the border. And that's part of the reason why him and his administration are going to get kicked out, is that they legitimized on a bipartisan popularity basis Donald Trump's thesis that the border needs to be secure. That was not the case in 2016. That was not the case in 2020. Joe Biden created a national consensus that Donald Trump was right on the border by way of the asylum crisis. That being said, you are going to see more expulsions than you did before. What I wonder, though, is quietly one of the quiet little reunions that has happened over the Biden administration is two diametrically opposite forces, Donald Trump and the Americans for Prosperity machine. It's the reason why Heaton and I went to the border, for a very Trump-friendly message about how the border does need to be secured. And part of that little junket that we were on was also a nice little walkthrough. Hey, also the regulatory state should be relaxed, so there are easier visas for migratory work that people come in and go out.
Yeah.
I wonder whether or not this dance that has happened very quietly, very under the radar. The last time that you saw the Kochs really go after Donald Trump was putting all the money behind Nikki Haley. But whether or not now that this is the case, they have been good soldiers in pushing their secure the border message. They are as plugged into Republican politics as anybody. Are you going to see beyond, look, the migrations are, the expulsions are something that obviously is going to be an adversarial element and was brought up.
And I think
lot.
probably a civil rights nightmare, by the way, in terms of just the judicial.
Well, also
elements.
the other thing is like, okay, so we're going to cut all these federal employees and then also do a large scale governmental program.
I don't think they'll be cutting those employees.
Well, but again,
But they
it's
don't
like,
have enough right now to go to all 50 states and round up 11 million people.
they're
So-
not. They can't.
So we have to look.
What they can do is target the worst actors for which not a lot of people are going to be crying because they get expelled, and that's people with criminal records, people that are, they'll find a way to get the judges to say, no, we reject your asylum claim, or you crossed over, you didn't even claim asylum, you're out. What the Trump administration will do is start figuring out pathways to eject them somewhere, which has been the larger problem. Beyond the idea of finding them and actually getting them out of there, the bigger problem that you have from an American perspective is where do they go? Because these countries don't want to take them, because by and large, these are not people that you want in your country if they're gang members or they're, bad apples. So it's going to be Trump trying to make deals with countries to figure out a way that, hey, we're going to send some of these people back and, you can do whatever you want with them. But I do think we're going to see more of it. I do think it's a lot more complicated than just, oh, my favorite taco shop is going to close. And I do think that what has happened over the last 4 years became bipartisan, agreed upon for a reason, because the asylum system was fucking broken.
And having read both of the bills, the one that was like 100% Republican and the bipartisan one, there were increases of staffing for immigration and customs enforcement, but not to the levels that would allow them to round up 11 million people in some like very violent, I do think we're going to hear some horrible stories, and I don't think this is going to be necessarily a good thing, but I don't think this is going to be like the nightmare Nazi-ish situation that I think people are picturing, where like in February of 2025, there's going to be a day where just like the government storms in and takes all the Mexicans and like ships them. Like, I don't want to say that it's going to be okay. There are people that I am worried about.
My mistress,
but like Justin,
illegal,
but like
Justin, I was
Justin,
going to dump her soon because she's hitting 30, but still.
like Justin said, I think there's a hierarchy of prioritization that has to happen just for pure staffing and funding alone.
Yeah. And let's get back to the RFK and vaccines thing. I think that a lot of people that very much believe in childhood vaccines, and I'm currently in the process of vaccinating my child, so I believe in that, don't necessarily agree with RFK in terms of the chilling effect that it could have on people's belief in him. That being said, if you throw them in the FDA review process and it takes 30 million more than it was and 6 months longer on the approval process, but now a bunch of other people that are vaccine skeptics are like, well, if RFK says that's okay, then maybe it's better. Then you want to know
You
what?
more herd immunity because more people plug into it?
Well, that, and also it's like, if we're going to really talk about this immigration thing, and we're going to say, look, you need to solve the border, and then you need to solve the asylum thing, and then we can actually deal with the problem of what you're focused on, Heaton, which is that it's too hard to get into America. It's too hard to temporarily get into America.
I would love it if I'm not holding my breath on this, but I would love it if one of the things that came out of the second Trump administration is we spend a bunch of money building the wall. We spend a bunch of money beefing up security, and part of the deal to get that through is we actually get immigration reform done. I don't think so. I think My read on Trump and his people is not that they are the standard Republican trope of the last, couple of decades of we like immigration, we just want it to be legal. Everything they previously did during the Trump administration restricted immigration legally wherever they could. So I don't think their goal is to solve it, but I would love it if that happened.
But they did put a wall for DACA deal on the table that was not taken by Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, because it was more profitable going into the midterms to run against Donald Trump as a out and out racist. And so it's like a lot of this is also, where is the mood of DC? Is there a strain of the Democratic Party that says, if there are bipartisan compromises, we are going to do it, as opposed to what we had seen in the first Trump administration, where it did not make financial sense to agree with nearly anything that they did.
Well, there's already a bill. There's already the bipartisan bill that was negotiated by James Lankford, hardly a liberal. He's the Republican senator from Oklahoma.
That was a sweetener to Ukraine money. Yes.
Yeah, but the thing was that bill is written. The Democrats have already said that they would sign off on it. And their whole thing, which I think there's evidence to support, was the MAGA people, Donald Trump in particular, slammed the brakes on that because he wanted to run on this issue. If that is actually true, there is a bill that they could pick up that's already written.
Sure.
And move forward.
The bill was DOA in the House before Donald Trump said anything about it. Now, whether or not it was going to be passed in the Senate, that's where Donald Trump put his thumb on the scale, was saying like if it was going to die in the House anyway, then why should it have the grandeur of passing one body when it was going to die anyway? Now, it's politics. I think everybody was playing politics with that moment. It always frustrates me when we talk about that. It eventually became a standalone bill when none of the people who authored the bill actually were going to vote for it, including Lankford and Kyrsten Sinema. But it wasn't actually a bill by itself. It was a sweetener to get Ukraine money through the Senate.
But the point is, there was a negotiation. There is a bill on paper.
Yes.
There's a bill on paper. There's a starting point. If they do want to negotiate and solve this in the next 4 years, there is a starting point that has already been talked about.
Yes.
So, okay.
At least the asylum stuff is going to be solved.
Yeah. Next one. We have 3 left. Nuclear war. Are we all going to die?
I am frankly less terrified now.
Me too.
This is, to me, one of the great benefits of Donald Trump is that, look, like, Trump's a question mark. I think that the pro-Trump camp has overdone and overstated the he's an anti-war dove character thing. I think that's overstated. There's a lot of word soup that he has. Word salad with Kamala, word soup with Trump. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's a pacifist, but I do think that he is, to put it artfully, a tactical thinker rather than a strategic thinker. He is thinking situationally rather than in terms of any broad schema of an ism, and he is a question mark. And insofar as that question mark exists, I think he is more likely. I think his default state in all things is to try to cut a deal and get a good deal. His default state is to figure out how to get a deal. And I think the end goal is for peace. I think he wants peace more than he wants war. I think here's where you should be worried listening to this at home. If you were of the position that America should indefinitely fund the war in Ukraine, because Russia is an evil player, Ukraine is a democratic ally and a liberal democracy, and America has a moral obligation to fund it indefinitely in its efforts, you should be concerned. I think that we are funding a proxy war, and that the Ukraine is likely going to be collateral damage in a message that we are sending to China, and that there's a very good chance that it would end up at some deal anyway, and we're just prolonging how long the carnage is going to go on before that deal happens.
Because we want to drain Russia.
We want to drain Russia.
Which they said.
Yes.
And I think Trump is more likely to facilitate a deal in that situation, which would not be. The other thing too is I don't think he's going to accelerate it, which is the other thing. Like, the occasional calls we get, not so much now, but at the very beginning, where it's like, well, we should, why can't we have a no-fly zone? Because a no-fly zone is not a fucking force field you put up by hitting a button. It means you shoot planes out of the fucking sky. That's what that means, a no-fly zone. I think with the Biden and Kamala administration,
I cast no-fly zone.
Yeah, I'm using my white mana card on my
tap 2.
Yeah, I think that the Trump Kamala, I was more worried about them sleepwalking into World War III, of just prolonging a proxy war until it accelerated, and it eventually hit some point where Putin goes, well, we're going to send in a tactical nuke here, and we're going to knock out Ukrainian troops on Ukrainian soil, but the fallout's going to hit. Like, that was I think it's less likely to happen under Trump.
I'm curious your thoughts on the Middle East, Justin.
My thought in general in the Middle East, and I'm glad that we are at a point now with this conversation where I think some of the more adrenaline laden conversation has drained out a little bit, and we're back to a point where I have lived with Mideast conversation where guess what? There's never a fucking good plan in the Middle East. It's always it's a gigantic bucket of thorns that you're just trying to not get stung as much, especially from the United States' perspective, because we have outsized interest not only with Israel, but also with other Muslim majority countries, up to and including Saudi Arabia. I loathed the State Department from the Biden administration.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a feckless, worthless, make work horse operation that also was so unbearably arrogant that they could not fathom the idea that they were sleepwalking into World War III. I've said before that I thought the worst way that you could run a State Department was the way that Donald Trump ran it in 2016, where you just put a bunch of people who had no idea what the hell they were doing and fired them repeatedly until the Biden administration came along and they're like, we don't fire anyone for any reason whatsoever. There's literally nothing you can do. What if we just armed the Taliban with $3 billion worth of weapons? Still can't. Won't fire anybody. What if people are falling from the plane while we're taking off because we fucked this up so bad? Still no. 13 dead Marines? No. We drone bombed a family for no reason? Not even going to talk about it. There's nothing that we can do. How about Ukraine? We're going to take credit for saying that Russia was going to attack. Are you going to do anything? Nope.
Ukraine couldn't have seen that coming, by the way.
We're just
you're welcome, Ukraine, for
we're
that.
We're going to take a big win. We told you it was going to happen. Do you have any agency? Nope, not at all. We're the American State Department. We're the most powerful organization in terms of international diplomacy. We have no say in anything. October 7th happens. Well, this really seems like something that you guys should figure out and step in on. It really seems like the fact that you took maximum pressure off of Iran backfired on you. We're not going to do anything different. We are going to just let this thing continue to fester. We're not going to pick a side. We're going to initially back Israel, and then we're going to be terrified about the election, and so we're going to hedge. So literally, the worst of everything happens. We're going to let American hostages languish. We're going to let people die by the scores in Gaza. We're going to let Netanyahu continue to expand the war because we know that he doesn't want to go to prison, and he's going to face justice before. Then you have the thing that happens with Sinwar, and it's like, now's when you go. Now is when you send everybody. Now is when you send Biden to Doha and you demand that Bibi comes in and you say, here's where we're going to land the plane when it comes to Gaza. Here's where we are going to bring in the Saudis.
Yeah. War's
we are going
over.
To say, you need to make a plan right now. What do? Not jacked off. So I loathe them. I'm glad they are all fired. I hope that they all enjoy their MSNBC contracts. I don't know what's going to happen with Trump coming in, but aside from the one time that I was in Tokyo,
Hogan will make a very good secretary.
Well, let me tell you something, BB. Aside from the time that I was in Tokyo,
Tony Hinchcliffe, ambassador to
Puerto Rico.
I don't know. Aside from the time that I was in Tokyo and Donald Trump was actively antagonizing Kim Jong-un to send his nuclear weapons over, I think it's just refreshing that even if it's chaotic, Donald Trump has charged into the breach on stuff like this and at least hasn't done what I think is the worst version of international diplomacy, which is pushing paper back and forth forever as real people die. At the end of the day, the United States, whether you like it or not, is an international 800-pound gorilla in a lot of different theaters. You can think that we should be less. You can think that we should be more. I think it is foolhardy to think that we aren't.
You've given me a lot to think about on that one. I tend to look at my master's degree was in international politics. So I'm familiar with all the isms of realism and international liberalism and all of that. And I tend to think that way. I'm not confident people actually, I'm confident every one of the State Department could give you a fucking lecture on every one of those things. But one of the things you've made me think about, Justin, is the kind of talk shop element to all this. There was a moment when, and I think this is a weird perennial element to Democrats, where when Obama came in, there was a moment where Obama went to go meet with Republicans in Congress and they didn't relent. And there was a like legitimate, like, but I came to Congress and I explained our correct position.
This is the third act of the West Wing.
Why have you not come around to, but I explained this to you. I met with you. There seems to be like we're right. And if we can convince people, they'll come on board kind of element. You've injected that into my interpretation of this somewhat, Justin, where I wonder if the State Department kind of believes that if we have a meeting that goes really, really well, we can get everybody on board.
Here's the one thing that I think that you can say about Donald Trump's leadership. We have seen enough of it, is that, again, Donald Trump thinks that every problem in the world is building a building in Manhattan. Everything is, they're all just different versions of paying off the unions and getting your stuff from the the Department of Buildings and passing the environmental reviews. It's all just the bureaucracy of doing that. It's the same problem for every problem in the world. The one thing that I've heard from not only people specifically that were involved in the government, but also just reportedly, is that Donald Trump does look at the US government as a holistic thing. And so like what the difference in the border was, and he talked about this in his rallies, is like right now we're going to have this problem of sending people out of the country. The question is where they go. Donald Trump, instead of just making that a Department of Homeland Security problem, he calls the State Department and says, hey, you call Guatemala and find out how much we're paying them. Say we're not going to pay them that anymore unless they take back these people. And now all of a sudden the Guatemalans are like, well, all right, we do like that money. So sure, we'll take these criminals back in a way that they weren't going to before. State Department is the same thing. It's like, look, either state and defense work together with this kind of stuff or they don't. And I don't believe that they did in any way during the Biden administration. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I will just say that I am thrilled to never hear the name Anthony Blinken ever again in my life.
Yeah. When it comes to nuclear war, I was more concerned about that with our antagonization of Russia. And I do think that the Ukraine war is going to come to an end. I think the pipeline of weapons is going to stop. It's been a stalemate for a very long time. Trump is aware of that. He's already talking to Putin. NATO, I pay attention to international relations, and NATO's already saying like, yeah, Ukraine probably shouldn't be in NATO. They should just be independent, which is what Putin's been saying the whole fucking time. We're getting to the place where we could have been in 2021, but like, okay. So I'm actually feeling that because Americans also, I don't think are aware of the escalations that were happening in that theater, that there were things that were not allowed in the beginning that are being allowed now, like missiles being sent into actual Russia and the Ukrainians taking Russian territory. Like this was escalating. And I think
is.
Yeah, it is currently escalating with Biden in charge. And I think that ends with the Trump administration. The Middle East, there's the hopeful side of me. And then there's the, oh my God, this is going to get so much worse side of me. So I'll start with the pessimistic side, which is that I know Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, sees Gaza as excellent beachfront property. I know that the Israelis right now are in the process of clearing and quite frankly, stealing the northern part of Gaza. I could see Trump just being like, okay, just get rid of the Gazans, do it quick. And that's something I'm definitely concerned about. Right now, that seems to be acceptable in Washington, D.C., and I don't know where Trump falls on that. On the other hand, Trump has been talking about how pathetic it is that Netanyahu has disrespected Biden and the United States in the way that he has. And I don't think Trump's going to put up with that. So I could see Trump putting a stop to it real quick by basically threatening Netanyahu in a way that Biden never did.
He publicly bitched out Netanyahu for not allowing American jets when we killed Soleimani.
Really?
Yeah. He was like, Netanyahu, this would have been easier. We could have done it faster and quicker if he would have allowed us to.
Isn't kind of the whole thing that we have an ally in the Middle East from which we can use to do like, isn't that the thing we get out of this from a realist perspective?
And so,
Trump sees it that way.
Yeah. And so Trump's, him and Bibi have had they are amongst everything else that you could say. And there's been reams written about both. They are both strong-willed men that want their way. And either you are going to bully the other person or you're going to get bullied. What I think Trump realizes is that nobody can out-bully us. We are the biggest kid on the block. We have the most money. We have the most weapons. Everyone who wants to be on our team needs to be on our team. If it comes to a dick measuring contest, we're Milton Berle, and BB is the Micro Penis Award winner.
I do wonder what has been said. I mean, I know that Trump has taken a ton of money from Miriam Adelson, who is a Zionist, wants to take that land, thinks Palestine belongs to the Jewish people, the end. I also know that BB's been rooting for Trump, but the great thing about Trump in this arena is that he has no problem going back on his word with anyone. So there's two different ways this can go. One is an absolute nightmare for the Palestinians, and one is this fucking stops. And I don't know which way it's going to go, but we did know how this was going to go with the Biden administration. And I think it was a continuation of Kamala, which is why she lost Michigan.
Can you imagine if it's a double Carter?
What does that mean?
So Carter, of course, gets run out in part because of what happened with Iran with the hostage crisis. And then Reagan comes in within like a month. The hostages are released. And since then, there has been reporting that, well, there was a secret deal and Reagan's people were telling the Iranians, hey, hold off. We're going to win. Imagine if Trump just double peace deals in like the first month in like January, Mideast peace deal, Ukrainian peace deal. And
I would love it.
Yeah.
Nothing would make me happier.
And you would never hear the end of it. It would be like, oh, this was engineered. They held out.
But Tulsi Gabbard has Trump's ear. She is always about peace. So it's like,
Republican
I do have
Tulsi Gabbard. She switched.
I know.
I was, by the way, I was advised, like when Tulsi Gabbard started like cutting into the national spotlight, I was like, hey, I like a veteran who's pro peace. Like my DC friends were like, Heaton, you do not want to tether your wagon to this lady. She's insane. She's crazy. And at first I kind of took that seriously. Then I was like, whenever anybody says that we shouldn't be involved in other countries, like Dennis Kucinich, Ron Paul, to like anybody that steps out of the American defense, they're cuckoo, they're cuckoo puffs. Yeah. So yeah, this is one of my big. I'm the only person that gives a shit about this, other than Jeremiah Johnson. I think.
I don't think that's true.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people do.
This is a big thing, and like, I realize trade is boring and wonky for most people, so I'm going to just walk you through this is a very basic thing of how trade works. Scotland's really good at making sheep. It's shit at making wine. They would fucking fry it if they could. If the Scots could figure out how to fry wine, they would. And it's too cold. They can't grow grapes, right? I'm sure that there's probably some fucking vineyard in southern Scotland that's not very good. But they're real good at growing fat ass sheep that make good wool, right? Meanwhile, France, great at making wine. Okay, sheep kind of look like greyhounds, a bit effeminate in my opinion, but their wine's really, really good, right? And so what you do is you have Scotland really good at making sheep, really bad at making wine. France, okay at making sheep, great at making wine. The Scots sell the sheep to the French. They get wine back from the French. This is great. What happens when you start putting in tariffs is the Scottish wine industry goes, we need help from all these French people. They're undercutting our wine prices. We need you to step in and put tariffs on the French wine to help our domestic Scottish wine industry. And they put up tariffs on that. And then the French go, fuck you, we will put tariffs on wool from Scotland. And then as a result, you do get more Scottish wine. You get more Scottish. It's really expensive. You get more of it. You get less French wine. The French get more okay French sheep and they get less Scottish sheep. The result is everybody in this equation gets less sheep and less wine. That's how trade tariffs work. You end up getting individual industries that are advocating for it because, yes, it is beneficial to them. It is harmful to the consumer and it's harmful to the overall economy of both countries. You don't make your country prosperous by putting rocks in your harbor, and you don't make your country more prosperous by responding to rocks in a harbor by putting rocks in your harbor. That's what Trump is advocating. This is bad on a fundamental level. There are people that are going to be in favor of it because it benefits them. It doesn't benefit you as a consumer, and it doesn't benefit the overall economy, us, or the people in the other country. I'm very worried about this. I think that this could be a real stumbling block for the economy. I think it's going to raise prices on people. It'll suck for me, but I can take it on the chin. The people that I'm worried about are poor people that are struggling, people that are really looking at their grocery bill and having to debate whether they're getting the can of beans that cost 82 cents or the can of beans that cost $1.43. They're really having to have a conversation about that with their spouse. Those are the people who are going to get fucked over. And I'm worried about that. And that is going to be a shitty element of the Trump administration.
Here's my question, though. Can they do it? Because we've signed all these treaties. We have the World Trade Organization. Like, we created the World Trade Organization. I don't think he can just slap tariffs on things the way he's saying that he can.
He can't slap tariffs on things. What he can do is he can put on penalties for unfair trade practices. So technically what Trump did back during the first administration with China was not tariffs. We call it tariffs. I'll call it tariffs. It wasn't tariffs. It was punitive reprisal fees put on Chinese goods for unfair practices and abuse. He has done that. He does have the ability to do that. Congress has also outsourced a decent amount of trade policy to the president, which is constitutionally Congress's prerogative, but is functionally now the president because it's been delegated to the presidency by Congress. So I think
the trade representative, right? The U.S. trade representative. Is that what you're talking about?
I don't recall the exact mechanisms by which to do this, but I think that this is something that the president has a lot of latitude on. This is not like where people go, oh no, if Trump gets in, he will just end Obamacare. No, you can't do that. That has to go through Congress. But there is a lot of trade latitude there, and I think he could wreck this.
Is this something that you might be willing, when you get back to DC, to interview some people about and get some clarity for us on? Like, what is he allowed to do?
I really ought to do a trade episode. I wasn't going to do one if Kamala got in, but now that she's in and like it somehow I'm having to talk about trade. I thought we'd all kind of reached a consensus on this. We didn't. It would do well for me to do a trade episode explaining why trade is good, and it is good.
Yeah, but that's not really
also
the question. It's not the ideological stuff that I feel like we need to know right now. I would love it if you could find a professor out there or someone who works in the area to let us know, like, legally, how do these tariffs work? Like, legally, what is the president allowed to do? What is he not allowed to do? Like, because he's promising to put, 200% tariffs on things. Like, can he do this is my question, because promise is out of Trump. Who knows if he's looked into it? And I don't know what's allowed either.
They seem very confident that they have the ability to do this.
They seem confident about a lot of shit. Like, that I don't think they can actually do practically or legally. So
can I ask you this, Eaton? Do you believe that the stuff that was put on China was materially harmful to the American economy?
Yeah, because one of the things you're looking at with,
even if, and let's say, I'm going to play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
What if China is being unfairly, and so this isn't really free trade in the way that you've described it, where there are two equal countries that are, the best argument. Trading. That China has restricted American goods. They don't allow American companies to sell their wares inside of China. They do actively restrict them. And so there should be reprisals unless there is an actual free trade in the way that you described it.
Yeah. So two things. That's the best argument. The best argument is temporarily using tariffs and penalties in order to push for normalization of trade. That's the best argument. As I've mentioned many times on the show, that is not Trump's position. That is not what Trump says. He says tariffs are good. He is a protectionist. He thinks that it is a method by which to build up domestic industry. He's the guy putting rocks in the harbor. So while, yes, that is a possibility, I do not think that is the extent to which he will take it. In terms of, was it materially beneficial or harmful to America? When I look at the jobs saved and I looked at the actual numbers, it doesn't seem that they did a tremendous job of benefiting American industry. And the other thing you got to look at is, what's the opportunity cost with all of this? So I'm sure the economy is going to grow, but the question's not, is the economy growing or retracting? The question is it growing as much as it could have? And the opportunity cost is a difference. Like if everybody's 10 cents overall, the whole country, the GDP, we grow by 1% next year. We could have grown by 2.5%. That's a material benefit, particularly for people at the bottom. So I would concern myself with the opportunity cost there.
Yeah, I do think that there is a rightful fear of the robustness of the American supply chain. And I think that lockdown really kind of put the scare into.
People say that, though, on literally everything. Like, should every product be part of that supply? I would say if there's stuff you're worried about, let's figure out how to exempt that.
Again, and this is where.
But just saying everything.
Okay, so yeah, you're right. Look, this is part of the problem, is that campaign rhetoric is very rarely actual policy.
Yeah.
Right? You campaign in, poetry, you govern in prose. Mm-hmm. So we don't know exactly what it is, what is going to happen. I guess you can model what Donald Trump did in his first term with his second term. But I think that there is very, very fair leeway to go from where you are, which is, let's take Donald Trump at his word that he wants blanket tariffs on.
And Vance has been a very big proponent of this.
That let's take them at their word. That's what it's going to be. Or it's going to be what he did in the first term, kind of plus, which is what other advisors that go on CNBC say, which is like, no, it's not going to be universal. It's going to be, hey, Korea, either you're going to allow Ford to sell at a competitive price, or we're going to restrict Hyundais, or you're going to have to build a factory here. We're not going to allow you to build a factory in Mexico and try to save on shipping and ship it in. If you're going to do that, if you're going to build in North America and try to ship into it, sell in the United States, then we're going to make you build the factory here in the United States. So at least there's American jobs that are created. There's a buffet of what the Trump campaign has said. There's Trump at the rally. There's JD Vance during podcasts. There are these economic advisors that go on CNBC for the more business class people. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
And then I added one more to the list for the ladies and their dudes, I guess. National abortion ban.
I don't think that was ever a real thing.
I don't either.
And I don't think, again, the fascinating thing about that issue, and I said it on the PX3 show last time, is that number one, I hope desperately that we can actually start having a post-Roe conversation about abortion now, that we can talk about the reality of these trigger laws. We can talk about the reality of the enforcement of them, the selective enforcement of them. I said last night, my wife giving birth to our child and being pregnant with our child in a red state that had a very restrictive trigger law terrified the living shit out of me. But we need to stop talking about this like it's a Senate issue and we're all just waiting for whatever team to get to 60 votes and then it's going to change. It's changed. There are statewide things, a few of them passed last night, and we just need to start coming to a national consensus on this, whether it's state by state or some kind of national framework. I don't believe I will take Donald Trump at his word that he does not want a national abortion ban and will not sign one. So,
yeah. And again, the Democrats do not have, or the Republicans do not have 60 votes in the Senate. The Democrats will not allow it to move forward. They will shut down the government before they allow this to happen. If this is what you were voting on, the situation right now is bad in red states. It's not going to get any worse.
Oh, by the way,
nationally.
do you think that the Democrats are really pumped that they didn't break the filibuster? Do you think, or are they really still just into the idea of kill the filibuster?
What a
That it's a
fucking
racist institution.
Yeah.
Do you think, did it get less racist last night?
That drove me to, like that. Oh my God, doing that. Like, you know, like the minimum wage started as a racist institution in the United States. It was started by white groups that wanted to price out black groups. That's how it, and there are good arguments for the minimum wage but like I would, the guy that is rallying against the minimum wage regularly would not describe it
Also,
as the minimum wage, which started as a racist institution, because that's not how people are using it. That's a dumb way to approach the topic.
Spoiler alert, look into some of the initial voices on abortion itself.
Yeah, but
Not
you
exactly
look
free
at
of racial.
you don't have to trace it to the
overtones.
intellectual lineage. That's a bad, lazy debate tactic to try to do it by the fallacy of association. I can't remember. As far as the abortion thing goes, I raw dog a lot.
God.
And I'm pretty potent.
Shoot.
Wow.
So this is something that is directly
there.
concerning to me, you know, and I 15 times a year I have to pay for one of these things. And
$300.
15
Yeah.
times.
Very
That's more than
potent.
one
Yeah.
month.
very, very potent, very potent.
300 in a ride.
Yeah. I
Did they give you a punch card?
They do. They do. I walk by, whenever I walk by the abortion store, they wave to me. I get a free cup of coffee now. They just send
Jesus
Ubers.
Christ.
Yeah, look, I think one of the really big deals to come out of the Trump administration last time was that there were Supreme Court justices that were appointed that allowed for Dobbs v. Jackson, which removed Roe v. Wade. I think that's a very legitimate thing for people to be angry about, independent of the jurisprudence itself. The outcome of that was that the national abortion situation changed. I think that is something that pro-choice people were very right to be freaked out about from the Trump administration. All of that being said, I agree with Justin. I don't think that Trump is itching to do a national abortion ban. I think that there are elements of the Republican Party that are itching to do a national abortion ban. I do not think it is a monolithic or a consensus position within the Republican Party.
Yeah.
I think that the weight of the Republican Party is this should be a state's issue. And you will see a bunch of bills that will never get to the House that are written for a national abortion ban by like the most red Republican member of Congress from Mississippi. You'll see those headlines. They're not going to do anything. I'm not worried about that. I don't think people should be worried about it.
I'm not either.
Yeah. Well,
I think if people have any other, like if we didn't get any of your fears, like send us an email and we'll finish this next week.
We'll do it in the emails.
I have one more, but I would have felt the same way under Kamala. I do think we've got a very unsustainable deficit. Again, I draw everyone's attention to the fact we're now paying more on interest payments than the defense.
Yep.
That's weird. And also really historically, really a bad sign for a great power when we're paying more interest than we are for.
Did you see Trump on Rogan?
I listened to the first half and then I was like, I don't think this is going to get.
But what he talked about, because Rogan was like, why didn't you pay down the debt? You said you were going to pay down the debt. Why didn't you pay down the debt? And he got into his thing about like we're ready to do it. And then COVID, blah, blah, blah. But he had this little digression that I thought was very telling for how Trump thinks, where he's like, well, really, when you look at our assets, we're under leveraged. Because again, he thinks everything is
real estate.
Everything is a real estate deal. And he's like, yeah, it looks bad on paper, but you haven't been in my shoes where I was up to my ass in debt. But if the property, if you can sell the property for more, now obviously no one's going to sell the United States, but he's like, look, there's no amount that will dislodge us from how valuable we are to the rest of the world. And then he's like, well, yeah, but no, we'll definitely pay it down.
Yeah. Well, I'm worried about that. That being said, though, I think Kamala would have been better than Trump on it based on all of the models. Yeah. Because this is
another area that we're talking about the presidency having control of something they don't have. This is a Congress thing.
Yeah.
They determine the money. So the president, whether it's Trump or Kamala,
have undue influence over the tax thing. There's a reason we call it the Bush tax cuts. There's a reason we call it the Trump tax cuts.
No, as Americans, we shouldn't do that.
No. I mean, the president does set the agenda for his party in Congress.
Yeah. They've got a lot of soft power. But yeah, you can either cut spending, you can increase taxes, or you can grow the economy. The Republicans consistently go, we'll just grow the economy, and I hope they do it. But the likelihood that they can do it year over year for 20 years is very low.
Especially if they're cutting all the taxes.
Well, and that's the thing is that tiny government guy who does not want a oversized federal government and day-to-day interactions in the American public. I'm looking at this going you're not going to grow your way out of this as fast as you guys think you are. And that means that the responsible thing to do is to fund the government you have rather than cut back and not fund the government you have. And so that's going to happen more under Trump. It would have been bad under Kamala, but it would have the deficit would not have increased as fast based on all models.
Yeah, I mean,
I still think if that's your issue, that's a Congress thing.
All right. I think we've done the best that we can do here on the show.
And then we moved on to our Patreon topic, which our Patreon episode really turned into a bit of a therapy session. Because we talked about how we deal with the stress of world events, and considering that the three of us are so dialed in and we can't just turn it off because this is how we make our livings, I think our insights and how we stay sane, that might be a good episode for you if you're still feeling upset. But I hope that helped you feel at least a little bit better, even though there's obviously some tough times likely in the chaos ahead. And if we missed a fear that you'd like us to analyze next week, email we'renotwrongpod@gmail.com by Tuesday, November 12th, and we will continue that exercise for whatever we've missed. And as for Congressional Dish, the next few months in Congress are the lame duck, which is the most dangerous time in the Congress. This is when a bunch of people, well, apparently only 5 people who were just fired, but them plus a whole bunch of others who are giving up their power voluntarily, many of whom will move over to the private sector or the lobbying sector to cash in on their connections in Congress. Well, this is when a bunch of those unaccountable people retain their power for 2 months and generally are able to attach controversial, often corporate favors into must-pass legislation, so that their devious wishes can hitchhike their way into law undetected. And this Congress has at least 2 pieces of legislation that must be signed by the end of the year. That is the defense authorization, which gives authority for our war activities, and the funding for our entire government. But they won't finish those bills until pretty damn close to Christmas, when no one in corporate media will be paying attention because so many of them think their jobs is predicting the results of an upcoming election. So they're going to be giving themselves some time off. But that's going to be the start of my busy bill reading season. But until then, Claire and I have a bunch of hearings that we want to watch that we've put on the back burner while I created the study guide and read the border bills. And so coming up next, we're going to have a hearing about the dangers lurking in our food supply. This is the one area where when I look at the Trump administration and the probable addition of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to it, I know that he's been branded as a quack, but he is skeptical of these companies and what they're putting in our food supply. He's skeptical of the pharmaceutical companies and what they are putting in our medications. He is an environmental and frankly anti-corporate lawyer, so he knows how this stuff works. And so I want to play this hearing for you because the people that testified in it are people that are in RFK Jr.'s universe. And these are doctors and former pharmaceutical representatives. I mean, these are people that have identified the problem and will know exactly where to strike it. This is the one area of hope that I really do have. And so I want to play that hearing for you next. But bigger picture, I'm waiting for the results of the House election before I even think about the next Congress. And I'm going to ignore everything Donald Trump says or does until January 20th. Because that man has no power over us at all until January 20th. So, fuck him. I don't need to hear what he says, and neither do you. So my advice to you is take a break, enjoy the holidays, and then we will navigate whatever comes during the Trump administration the same way we did the last time, together. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
We're surrounded now by liars coming at us through our TV screens.
We don't have a domestic spying program.
They're content to fight in black and white despite the many in-betweens. We got a president who plays with the facts. And then he waves a flag to cover his tracks. As if a lie is alright, if the end will justify the means. Now we are so damn tired of being lied to.
The polar ice caps aren't going away.
We don't think we can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it flies. But we're not keeping quiet anymore. We are so damn tired of being lied to.
Government jobs consume the profits of the private sector.
We don't think we can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it flies. But we're not keeping quiet anymore. Now we're not keeping quiet.
These bills represent common sense, bipartisan solutions that actually solve problems.